The first time Ada Aurora walked into that small secondary school in Sucker, she looked like any other transfer teacher, quiet, polite, and almost invisible. Her clothes were simple, her shoes worn out, and her smile barely there. But her eyes told a different story. They held secrets, deep ones, the kind that could either save a person or destroy them. Nobody knew who she truly was, and that was exactly how she wanted it. The principal, a man everyone called Mr. Ochukwa, introduced her to the staff with a half smile and a tone that sounded like he didn't expect her to last long. New teachers rarely did. "This is Miss Ada. She'll be handling English language," he said, already looking past her as though she were just another name on paper. But the students noticed something different about her. Maybe it was the way she carried herself, the calm confidence, or how she spoke as though every word had weight. In her first week, Ada Aurora made no effort to be liked. She came early, sat quietly in the staff room, and left right after the closing bell. Some teachers gossiped about her. They said she probably ran away from her husband, or maybe she was hiding from debt. Others said she was too proud, too quiet for her own good. But there was one man who never joined their talk, Mr. Chaik, the fine arts teacher. Chaik was unlike anyone else in that school. He had a way of seeing beyond people's faces. He noticed that Ada Aurora's eyes never rested on anyone for too long, as if looking too deep would reveal something she was trying to keep buried. He greeted her every morning with a kind smile, and though she rarely replied with more than a polite nod, he never stopped trying. One day, during break time, a sudden rain caught everyone off guard. The sky opened without warning, and teachers ran into the nearest classrooms to take cover. Ada Aurora stayed back in the corridor, watching the rain with a faraway look. Chaik saw her and walked over, holding a piece of bread wrapped in nylon. "You don't like rain?" he asked, trying to start a conversation. Ada Aurora hesitated before replying. "I used to," she said softly, "before it reminded me of things I'd rather forget." He didn't press further. He just stood beside her, quietly eating his bread. That silence, comfortable, unforced, was the first time she felt safe in years. Days turned into weeks, and soon, Ada Aurora became the students' favorite. She didn't just teach, she spoke to them like they mattered. When she explained things, even the slowest learners understood. She listened to their worries, corrected them gently, and gave them hope that life could be more than what the village offered. But there were still whispers among the staff. One afternoon, a loud voice echoed from the staff room. "Who does she think she is?" It was Mrs. Ease, the home economics teacher, known for always stirring trouble. "Every day she's acting like she's better than the rest of us." Chaik, sitting in the corner marking drawings, looked up calmly. "Maybe she's just being herself," he said. "Oh, please," Mrs. Ease scoffed. "People like her are always hiding something. Mark my words, that woman is not who she says she is." Ada Aurora overheard the conversation from outside the door, and her chest tightened. That night, she sat in her small rented room, staring at a small brown envelope under her pillow. Inside were old documents, things that could unravel everything if anyone saw them. She had once been someone else, someone important. Her name wasn't Ada Aurora back then. It was Chiamaka Okeke, the daughter of a wealthy businessman who vanished after her father's empire crumbled under corruption charges. She had been 19 when everything fell apart. Her father was arrested, her mother fled abroad, and she disappeared into a new life with nothing but a fake ID and a will to survive. 7 years had passed since then, and she had learned how to blend in. To most people, she was just another teacher with a quiet face and no past. But deep inside, she lived every day with the fear that someone would recognize her. It wasn't until one afternoon that her calm life began to crack. The school was preparing for the Education Board's inspection, and everyone was on edge. Ada Aurora was helping to sort the students' exercise books when a black SUV pulled into the compound. Out stepped a man in a suit, tall and confident, flanked by 2 assistants. The moment she saw him, her stomach dropped. It was Mr. Kalu, the same man who had once worked for her father, the one who knew everything about the Okeke family. He was older now, but she recognized the scar on his chin and the sharp eyes that always noticed too much. Ada Aura froze. She tried to slip away unnoticed, but his gaze swept across the teachers until it landed on her. For a moment, time stood still. He tilted his head slightly, as if trying to remember where he had seen her. She quickly turned and walked away, heart pounding, pretending to be busy. But the damage was done. Later that day, when the teachers gathered for the inspection briefing, Mr. Kalu addressed the staff, his tone polite but probing. "Some of you look familiar," he said casually, scanning the room again. "It's strange how faces can carry memories." Ada Aura could barely breathe. She kept her head down, praying he wouldn't connect the dots. But Chaik noticed her trembling hands. After the meeting, he quietly approached her. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. She forced a smile. "I'm fine, just tired." He didn't believe her, but he didn't push. He simply said, "Whatever it is, you don't have to face it alone." That night, Ada Aura sat by the small window in her room, tears quietly streaming down her face. She had come this far, built a new life, and almost believed she could stay hidden forever. But fate had other plans. Someone from her past was now in her present, and she could feel her secrets closing in. And yet, in the middle of that storm of fear, there was one thing that gave her strength: Chaik's quiet kindness. He was the only person who saw her without judgment, without curiosity, just with respect. And for the first time in years, she felt something she thought she'd lost forever: hope. For days after Mr. Kalu's visit, Ada Aura couldn't sleep properly. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that scarred face, those sharp eyes, the slight smirk that used to appear when he spoke to her father about business. It was as if her old world had found her hiding place and was knocking at the door. She tried to convince herself it was just a coincidence. Maybe he didn't recognize her. Maybe he had just been making conversation. But deep inside, she knew better. Men like Mr. Kalu never forgot faces. Especially not faces tied to secrets that could destroy reputations. The next morning, she walked into school pretending everything was fine. The air felt heavier than usual. Some students waved at her, but even their cheerful greetings couldn't calm the uneasy thump in her chest. She noticed Chaik standing by the assembly ground, arranging art materials. He caught her eye and gave a small smile, one that said he understood without needing to ask. She smiled back, faintly, grateful for his quiet presence. Classes went by in a blur. When she stood in front of her students, her voice wavered slightly, but she forced herself to sound steady. She had survived 7 years by keeping calm, and she wouldn't let one man undo that. Still, every sound outside the classroom made her jump. Every unfamiliar footstep made her glance over her shoulder. During break, she went to the staff room to fetch her notebook. Just as she reached her seat, she noticed an envelope sitting on her desk. It wasn't there earlier. Her name was written neatly on it. Miss Ada. Her throat tightened. She looked around, but no one was paying attention. With shaky hands, she opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper with only one sentence. "I know who you are." Her heart nearly stopped. The handwriting was elegant but unfamiliar. She read it over and over, hoping it was some kind of joke, but deep down, she knew it wasn't. Someone knew her secret. She stuffed the note into her bag and left the staff room, forcing herself to walk calmly. The corridors felt longer than usual, her mind spinning. Who could have written it? Was it Kalu? Or someone else who had begun to suspect her? That afternoon, as the students left, she lingered behind. Chaik found her sitting alone in the classroom, her gaze fixed on the empty chairs. "You've been quiet today," he said, leaning on the doorway. "Is everything all right?" Ada Aura hesitated. Part of her wanted to tell him everything, to let go of the burden that had chained her for years, but fear silenced her. "It's nothing serious," she whispered. "Just tired." Chaik nodded slowly. "You know, sometimes people carry too much on their own." But when you share it, it doesn't make you weak. It makes you free. His words lingered long after he left. That night, Ada sat by her small lantern, staring at the envelope on her bed. The note looked harmless under the light, but to her, it felt like a knife. She thought of leaving town again, disappearing into another life. But she had grown to love her students, and even though she never admitted it aloud, she had grown attached to Chaik. Running again would mean losing all of that. The next day, the school compound buzzed with unusual tension. The education board's representatives were still around, reviewing reports. Mr. Kalu's presence cast a strange shadow. He spent most of his time in the principal's office, but his eyes wandered whenever he walked through the compound. Once, Ada caught him looking at her from across the hallway. The corner of his mouth twitched upward, not a smile, but something colder. By noon, rain clouds gathered, and thunder rumbled in the distance. The teachers were in a meeting when one of the board assistants entered, holding a folder. "Mr. Kalu would like to see Miss Ada," he said. Every head turned toward her. She froze. The principal gave her a quick look, half curious, half uneasy. "You may go," he said. As she walked to the office, her palms felt damp. Her steps were slow, deliberate. When she reached the door, she paused for a second, inhaled deeply, and knocked. "Come in," Kalu's voice called. He was sitting behind the principal's desk, legs crossed, an easy smile playing on his lips. "Ah, Miss Ada," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Please, sit." She sat, her face calm though her pulse raced. "You teach English, right?" he began, flipping through a document. "I've seen the students' reports. Impressive results. You've done well." "Thank you, sir," she said quietly. He nodded, still studying her face. "You look familiar," he said, tilting his head slightly. "Where are you from?" "Anambra," she replied quickly. He smiled faintly. "Anambra, you say? I used to know someone from there. Chiamaka Okeke. You wouldn't happen to know her, would you?" For a split second, Adeora's mask cracked, her breath catching in her throat. But she forced a small shake of her head. "No, sir. I don't think so." He leaned back, watching her with quiet amusement. "Interesting. You look just like her. But maybe it's just coincidence." "Maybe," she whispered. He dismissed her with a wave, but as she stood to leave, he said softly, "Be careful, Miss Ada. The past has a funny way of finding people." Her legs felt weak as she stepped out. She walked straight to the back of the school, past the classrooms, until she reached the mango trees near the fence. There, she finally allowed herself to breathe. The wind rustled the leaves gently, carrying the faint scent of wet soil. She pressed her hand against her chest, trying to steady her heartbeat. Someone had found her. There was no longer any doubt. That evening, after the teachers had left, Chaik found her sitting on the bench near the art room. Her eyes were red, and her face pale. "You didn't go home?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "I don't know where home is anymore," she murmured. He sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "Whatever is happening, you don't have to face it alone." She turned to him, eyes glistening. "You wouldn't understand." "Maybe not," he said, "but I can listen." Something broke inside her then. She looked down, voice trembling. "My real name isn't Ada. It's Chiamaka. I changed it after my family lost everything. My father was arrested for fraud, and people said I ran away to hide the shame. I've been trying to start over, but someone here knows who I am." Chaik listened silently. There was no judgment, no shock, just calm understanding. "You don't owe anyone your past," he said finally. "You owe yourself peace." His words sank deep into her chest. For the first time, she let herself cry, quiet tears she had held for 7 long years. Over the next few days, whispers started to circulate. Someone had told the principal that Miss Ada wasn't who she claimed to be. No one said how they found out, but the rumor spread fast. Some teachers began treating her differently, their smiles tight and false. Even some students sensed the change. But Chaik stood by her. When others avoided her, he made sure she didn't sit alone. When she doubted herself, he reminded her of her worth. His kindness didn't come from pity, it came from respect. Then, one morning, Mr. Okchukwu called her to his office. His expression was stern. "Miss Ada," he hesitated, then corrected himself. "Or should I say, Miss Chiamaka? I don't know what's going on, but people are talking. The board is asking questions. This could affect the school's reputation." She sat quietly, her hands clasped. "I understand, sir," she said softly. "But I've done nothing wrong." "I know," he sighed. "You're one of the best teachers we've had. But this situation might get out of hand. You should be careful." She nodded, stood, and walked out. Every step felt heavier than the last. That evening, as the sun dimmed, she sat outside her room again, thinking of how far she'd come and how fragile everything felt. Chaik arrived quietly, holding a small drawing. It was a sketch of her teaching in class, surrounded by smiling students. He handed it to her. "You've given them more than lessons," he said. "You've given them hope." She looked at the drawing and smiled faintly through tears. "I don't know what I've done to deserve your kindness," she whispered. He smiled. "You don't have to deserve it. Some people respect you not for who you were, but for who you are now." At that moment, the world felt still. She realized that no matter how hard her past tried to haunt her, there was still light in the present. Kindness, friendship, maybe even love. But she also knew it wasn't over. Someone still wanted her secret exposed. Someone still held power over her truth. And soon, that secret would come crashing into the open, whether she was ready or not. That night, a heavy silence wrapped the little town like a blanket. The street lights flickered, and the hum of distant generators filled the air. Ada Aura sat by her window, wide awake, staring at the flickering flame of a half-burned candle. Her thoughts ran wild. The letter, the meeting with Mr. Kalu, the rumors spreading like wildfire, it all played over and over in her mind. Her hands trembled as she reached under her pillow for the brown envelope that had followed her through the years. Inside were the only traces of her past, her original ID card, an old photo of her parents standing beside their mansion in Enugu, and a single newspaper clipping, the headline bold and cruel: "Business tycoon Okeke arrested in multi-billion fraud scandal." She traced her fingers over her father's face in the photo. His proud smile, the one that once filled her with security, now filled her with pain. "Papa," she whispered, "I've tried to live right. I've tried to forget. But they won't let me." The night air was thick and humid. In the distance, dogs barked at nothing in particular, as if sensing something coming. She didn't know it yet, but that night would change everything. The next morning started normally enough. Students gathered for assembly, teachers chatted about the upcoming debate competition, and the principal tried to act like the tension in the school didn't exist. But when Ada Aura walked through the gate, conversations paused. Eyes followed her. Some smiled out of habit, others whispered behind their palms. She kept her chin up and her step steady, refusing to show how much it hurt. The more they talked, the more she reminded herself of Chaik's words. "You don't owe anyone your past. You owe yourself peace." But peace was the last thing she found that day. During the lunch break, a loud voice echoed from the staff room. "So it's true," Mrs. Ease said, her voice sharp like broken glass. "Our Miss Ada is actually Chiamaka Okeke, the daughter of that disgraced businessman." The room went still. A few teachers exchanged looks of disbelief, others leaned closer, hungry for more gossip. Chaik stood up immediately. "That's enough," he said firmly. "You have no right to judge her." Mrs. Ease sneered. "Judge her? Oh, please. People like her always hide behind fake humility. Imagine, all this time she's been pretending to be one of us." Before Chaik could respond, the door opened, and Ada Aura walked in. The room went silent. She looked around slowly, meeting every gaze head-on. "If you want to talk about me," she said, her voice calm but cold, "you could at least say it where I can hear it." No one spoke. Even Mrs. E's mouth hung open. "I've made mistakes," Ada Aurora continued, "but not the ones you're accusing me of. My father's choices were not mine. I was a child then, and when everything fell apart, I lost everything: home, name, peace. All I ever wanted was a chance to start again." The room remained frozen. Chaik's eyes softened with quiet pride. Without waiting for anyone's response, she turned and left. Her footsteps echoed down the corridor, strong and steady. But what she didn't know was that Mr. Kalu had been watching everything from a distance. He had overheard the conversation, and a slow, calculating smile formed on his lips. That afternoon, as teachers prepared to leave, he approached her near the gate. "Quite a scene in there," he said casually. She stopped, her heart tightening. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing much," he replied, his tone smooth. "Just a small favor. You see, some people would pay good money to know where the Okeke family's hidden assets went. You were the only one close enough to know." Her jaw clenched. "I don't have anything of theirs. I've been living like a stranger for 7 years. You think I'd hide money when I could barely afford rent?" He smiled faintly. "Not money, Chiamaka. Information. I know your father trusted you with something, a document, maybe? Something the authorities never found." "I don't know what you're talking about." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Then you won't mind if I tell the board that you used a false identity to get your job." Her blood ran cold. "You'd ruin my life just to chase ghosts." He shrugged. "That's the world we live in. Everyone wants something. You just have to decide what you'll give up." He turned and walked away, leaving her standing there in the fading daylight, trembling. That night, she didn't cry. She didn't sleep either. She sat in darkness, thinking, weighing every choice. If she ran again, she'd lose the only place she'd ever felt purpose. But if she stayed, Kalu could destroy everything. The next morning, she made up her mind. When she reached the school, she went straight to Chaik. He was arranging paints in the art room, humming softly to himself. "I need your help," she said, her voice low but firm. He turned, surprised by the look in her eyes, determination mixed with fear. "What's going on?" She told him everything, about Kalu's threats, the hidden documents, the night her father was taken, the whispers she'd been running from ever since. She explained how, before her father's arrest, he had given her a sealed folder, telling her to keep it safe no matter what. She had never opened it, too afraid of what it might contain. Chaik listened, his brow furrowed. "Do you still have it?" "Yes," she said, "but I wish I didn't." He thought for a long moment, then said quietly, "You've been running for so long, Ada Aurora. Maybe it's time to stop. Let's find out what's inside." Her fingers trembled as she handed him the envelope. He carefully broke the old seal and unfolded the papers inside. There were bank statements, property documents, and a letter, written in her father's neat handwriting. "My dear Chiamaka," it read. "If you ever read this, it means I didn't make it out. What they accused me of was partly true, but not all of it. I tried to protect our name, but greed consumed those around me. These papers prove who the real culprits were. Keep them safe. One day, the truth will find its voice." Tears rolled down Adeora's cheeks as Chaik read the words aloud. For years she had carried guilt that wasn't hers to bear, believing her father had been completely guilty. But now, for the first time, she saw that he had tried to protect her. Chaik placed a hand gently on her shoulder. This could clear your name, Ada Aurora. You don't have to hide anymore." She shook her head slowly. "Kalu will never let that happen. He's connected. If he finds out what's in here, he'll destroy it." Chaik looked at her with quiet conviction. "Then we won't let him." The following days were tense. Kalu became more aggressive, calling her into his office repeatedly, asking questions that felt more like traps. Rumors grew louder, twisting facts into poison. But Aurora held her ground. Then one morning, everything exploded. During a school-wide event attended by community leaders and parents, Kalu stood to make a speech. In the middle of it, he turned to the crowd and said, "Before we continue, there's something everyone should know. One of our teachers has been living under a false name, deceiving this institution." Gasps filled the hall. Aurora froze in her seat. He gestured toward her. "Her real name is Chiamaka Okeke, daughter of the disgraced businessman whose crimes rocked this country. She has been pretending all this while." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Some stared at her in disbelief, others in pity. But before Kalu could say more, Chaik stepped forward, holding a brown envelope. "You forgot to mention one thing, sir," he said, his voice steady. "The man you're calling a criminal wasn't alone in his dealings. He had partners, powerful men who framed him to protect themselves. And you, Mr. Kalu, were one of them." A ripple of shock swept through the hall. Kalu's face darkened. "What nonsense is this?" Chaik handed the envelope to the principal. "Inside are documents signed by Mr. Kalu himself. They prove he diverted company funds and pinned the blame on Mr. Okeke to save himself." The principal opened the papers, his eyes widening as he read. The hall went silent. Kalu stammered, his confidence evaporating. Security officers who had been stationed at the entrance stepped forward at the principal's signal. Aurora sat still, her heart pounding as Kalu was led away, shouting threats that nobody cared to hear. When it was over, Chaik turned to her. "You're free now." She couldn't speak. Tears streamed down her face, but this time they were tears of relief. In the following weeks, everything changed. The truth spread quickly, not as gossip but as vindication. The board apologized, the school stood by her, and the students celebrated her courage. Adeora's real name was no longer a burden, it was a story of strength. One evening, as the orange sky faded behind the hills, she walked with Chaik along the quiet path behind the school. The air smelled of rain and earth. "You didn't have to do what you did," she said softly. "You risked everything." He smiled. "You spent 7 years hiding because no one saw your heart. I wasn't about to let fear erase the person you've become." She looked at him, eyes shining. "I don't know what the future holds." "Then we'll find out together," he said. And for the first time in 7 years, she allowed herself to laugh, a real, free laugh that carried through the evening air. The woman who had once hidden from the world was no longer afraid. She had been found, not by those who wanted to expose her, but by the one man who saw her truth and respected it. And that, more than anything, was freedom. And that's where Adeora's journey ends, a woman who carried her past like a shadow but refused to let it define her future. 7 years of silence, fear, and hidden truth led her to one simple discovery. Real respect doesn't come from power or status, it comes from kindness, the kind that sees your scars and still chooses to stand beside you. If you felt every heartbeat of this story, make sure you subscribe for more powerful tales like this. Drop a comment below. Tell us the country you're watching from and what your local time says right now. Your stories, your moments, your time, they make this storytelling community alive. So don't just watch, be part of it.